Hi everyone. Welcome to the seminar, our research seminar organized by the Department of Linguistics and Modern Language Studies at UHK. I'm Jesse, the moderator of today's talk. And so we are very happy to have Professor Fang Fan to provide us with a talk related to the topic of generally global Englishes and translanguages in the context of textbook in the Greater Bay Area of China. But before I hand over to Professor Fang, I would like to introduce briefly about Professor Fang. So Professor Fang obtained his PhD from Center of Global Englishes, University of Southampton, UK, and he is now Professor of Applied Linguistics at Stanford University. He is among the world top 2% most cited scientists in 2022 by Stanford University and a highly cited scholars at Elsevier Leaks in 2021 and 2022. His research interests include applied linguistics, language attitude, identity, intercultural communications, and language education. And he published widely in journals like Asian Pacific Journal of Education, British Journal of Education, English Today, Journal of Multilingual and Multicultural Development, Language Culture and Curriculum, and also Teacher Portal, etc. So we are very happy to have Professor Fang to provide us a talk. And the topic that Professor Fang wants to talk about will be global Englishes and translanguages in textbook design and curriculum development for university in the Greater Bay Area of China. So please, Professor Fang, thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much, Dr. Yip, for your invitation and introduction, and thank you very much for Education University of Hong Kong. It's my great pleasure and honor to share with you some of my studies, and I also see some familiar faces as the participants. Also, thank you very much for joining. Today, my topic is it's more about Greater Bay Area. So I conducted a study related to this context. I think it's good that I talk about something related to the theme of the lecture series, and it just happens that one of my studies is related to this context. Okay, so I'm sharing the screen. Is the screen okay? Screen sharing, right? Okay. So my research interests are like global Englishes and translanguaging, and recently I tried to compare this to whatever we call as theoretical framework or paradigm or strategy, whatever, because different people would call global Englishes, would look at global Englishes and translanguaging from different perspectives. But recently I tried to see how these two concepts can be connected in applied linguistics in education as well. And this is one of the first studies that I try to relate the two concepts in textbook design and also curriculum development. Okay, so I'll be talking a bit on global Englishes and translanguaging, and then the study I conducted. The paper has been published, so if people are interested in, yeah, I can share this paper with you. So global Englishes is basically when we talk about mother tongue based multilingual education. So global Englishes or English as a lingua franca has been positioned right within this multilingual framework. So as we know that global Englishes and translanguaging, those concepts has challenged, those concepts have challenged the monolingual ideology. So here, basically this one is from UNESCO Bangkok. We see the living languages, okay, and 80% are in Asia Pacific. While if you see the number that only 40% of the world's children don't have the chance to learn their mother tongue. Okay, so from this English medium instruction, that it seems English is the dominant lingua franca, the language, while we need to shift the perspective from this multilingual perspective. That's why global English is, I think, from the what we call the mothers of global Englishes, right? Jennifer Jenkins, Barbara Seidelhofer, and Maryland professors and the mothers of global Englishes. And then the field has it's been developing, okay, that from the earlier world Englishes, English as a lingua franca, English as international language. I'm not going to talk about the slightly differences of those two or three paradigms, but I just would like to share something about the similarities while the term global English is. This term and also the language ideology, right, or those ideologies have challenged the belief of native speakerism and promote multilingual education, right? So from this multilingual perspective of language use, well, World English is, if you're familiar with World English, is this perspective or paradigm focused more on the varieties of English, try to codify, right, to codify different features, phonological features, and morphosyntactic features of the mainly post-colonial varieties. But from the global English's perspective, this is more dynamic, this is more fluid, right? So from the global English's perspective, scholars are interested in looking at, for example, topics like globalization, linguistic imperialism, language policy, and planning, etc. So it's more from this applied and also language in society from more like sociocultural perspective. And it's like global Englishes and translanguaging. So later I'll be talking a bit on translanguaging. It's different from the monolingual and it's different from the traditional SLA that first language should be banned, should be avoided. But global Englishes and translanguaging, those paradigm really value people's first language, okay, or languages, as well as local cultures as resources rather than a hindrance to language learning and intercultural communication. So global Englishes and translanguaging also valued local culture. It's more from the bottom-up perspective, right? First languages and local cultures in the process of language learning, of content learning, and in education in more general, right? And early ELF, okay, English as a lingua franca, if you are familiar with the definition, well, the earlier definition in 2011, right? So scholars look at English as the only option, right? From when English is used as a medium of instruction and also as a tool of communication as one of the only option. While later, the new phase, the later development of English and English as a lingua franca, scholars recognize that English is not the only option. English is one of the options, right, among many other multilingual, among many other languages from people's multilingual resources. So ELF, I think especially the recent research with this multilingual turn in applied linguistics. Yeah, the term ELF has been, I mean, kind of moved forward, right? Adapted to EMF. So later is here. It's called English as a multilingua franca, right? Well, Jenkins published this paper that English is not the only option for communication, but English is one of the choices, is one of the options for communication. So EMF, while English has been positioned from this multilingual perspective, this multilingual paradigm, recognize this complexity and super diversity of language contact. Okay, that goes to lots of this trans prefix, right? We have translanguaging and translingual practice. So different scholars have the preferences of translanguaging or translingual practice, but they are similar. Yeah. Of course, it is from this similar perspective. Yeah. Well, yes, people will argue some slightly differences, but I'm not going to, go deeper into the slightly differences of translanguaging or translingual practices. Okay, so here global English is policy, curriculum, pedagogy, and assessment place greater emphasis on providing teachers and learners with more exposure and engagement with the diversity of English as a global lingua franca, right? And also we need to recognize here from this perspective, the educational endeavor places more value on learners' multilingual resources and orients learners towards reappropriating native speaker norms or challenges these native speaker norms. While Galloway's model of global English is, while she positioned translanguaging as part of the global English's paradigm, while I would see translanguaging stands as its own, that I would just put translanguaging stands on its own, probably, right? But they have similarities. So later I'll be sharing another piece of study that I just compare global Englishes and translanguaging with one of my students, right? So this is the new paradigm. Yeah, Jenkins' paper here. Well, she positioned ELF, English as a lingua franca, as within this multilingualism, within the paradigm of multilingualism. So global English is, it should play a role. But of course, when we talk about why global English is, we see the we see the linguistic landscape, we see the number of non-native speakers, right? More than native speakers that have outnumbered native speakers of English. That we also argue that there is a paradigm shift in research, teaching, and recognition of the current linguistic landscape and also the sociolinguistic function of English. And also we need to recognize this multilingual, multicultural resources of individual speakers, right, that would challenge the monolingual perspective. But again, in reality, when we see the reality, I'm not that optimistic, right? Also, I see that global English is from a theoretical perspective from this kind of theoretical building, as well as lots of policy arguments in related to language policy, language planning, etc., etc. In reality, especially in Asian contexts, in contexts where English is traditionally regarded as a foreign language, still the norm, okay, still there's teachers they don't really have those options. Yeah, they are asked to teach in this way, to follow the textbooks, for example, to require and also to prepare students to pass those very those high stake exams. So global Englishes, okay, to what extent the role of global Englishes and also arguments of global Englishes, even principles of ELF, have been applied in reality, right? I really doubt, okay? Some bottom-up practices are there, but again, it's not the mainstream, right? Because we have those high-stake assessments, we have those top-down policy. While translanguaging is another some people call this as a theoretical framework or the applied theory of language. Some people call this as a strategy, but I think this is a great complement, or this is a great, I would say, strategy. Yeah. Again, when we talk about global Englishes or translanguaging, we don't really say that everyone should follow, okay, this paradigm, should follow this teaching strategy or this theory. It's an option, right? So I think translanguaging also provides what we call users of language, right? We don't really say like learners of language, right? The users of language. And also it respects people's multilingual discursive practices. Yeah. Again, we can also look at translanguaging as from the multimodal, right? It also includes people's multimodal, multisemiotic perspective, the resources as well. Okay, so I think just my personal view that I would say translanguaging it's more, I would say, practical in terms of language use. So it focuses on language use and discourse. Yeah, we look at if we look at translanguaging from a pedagogical translanguaging perspective, from a conversational analysis perspective, discourse analysis perspective, right? So here, translanguaging has been used, right, as a multiple discursive practices, as well as, the multimodal resources as well, this semiotic, trans semiotic resources as well. Okay, how people use these different types of resources for meaning making, right? And also from a pedagogical translanguaging perspective, yeah, we also understand how people, students, maximize their linguistic repertoire through the knowledge acquisition process, right? Through the learning process. Okay, and also translanguaging foregrounds the different ways that language users employ, create, and interpret different kinds of signs to communicate across contexts and participants and perform their different subjectivities. So we see that it's more flexible and this recognize people's different resources. Compared, I would say that global English is still recognize English, okay, because from the term is global Englishes, but translanguaging is more from with this trans prefix, right? It's more dynamic, more fluid, and this is from language as a fixed code to languaging, right? Language as a social practice to translanguaging. Yeah, some people would also argue that trans is a bit of redundant because languaging is already there, is enough. But people just want to compare that we put trans as the prefix to emphasize that language use is not about which codes that people use or which language the speaker really does the speaker speak, but from the translanguaging perspective, communication or meaning making is the priority, is the norm, right? We don't really say that what type of language you use. But again, this translanguaging space as well, that we don't really look at the verbal practice of simply like of language use, right? So I think this Zoom meeting itself is also a kind of translanguaging space. Yeah, that's in terms of, for example, communication, it's a more complex process of, for example, cognitive, psychological, social understanding, right? There's practices as well that we are producing knowledge, we are sharing knowledge through this Zoom meeting, and we create this space that people can join the meeting, people can take notes. Well, I cannot see people taking notes, for example, if you don't turn on your camera. But this process it seems invisible, but it happens, it's happening, right? It's this kind of communication. We see various communication through this cognitive, psychological, social, and also linguistic aspects. So this is a powerful theory and practice as well, so of language, and really challenges this so-called very fixed understanding of language. Even it challenges this discrimination of linguistic discrimination, and we recognize, we emphasize this. We also emphasize this inclusive education, right? Yeah. So some of the development of this translanguaging, yeah. So this polysemic nature that language use goes against the tradition of language separation and breaks the boundaries of the strict allocation of one specific language for one subject, yeah, or for one day or class session. Yeah, I'm not going to repeat everything, but this notion is originated from this bilingual education in Wales, yeah, that recognize people's multilingual and semiotic resources in language learning and language use. So it's powerful, I would say. Yeah, it's about challenging the nationalistic assumptions of named languages as well as the racial linguistic ideologies that contribute to the institutionalization of linguistic and social inequalities. So again, we don't put this linguistic hierarchy that certain language has power, or we don't want to prioritize, right, certain language in terms of communication and to knowledge acquisition as well. Okay. Spontaneous translanguaging and pedagogical translanguaging, yeah, according to Channels and Gorter, two types of translanguaging. I think it happens daily. It's a daily practice. Yeah, regardless, spontaneous or pedagogical translanguaging. But again, if we want to look at this classroom context, even spontaneous translanguaging happens in classroom context, both classroom discourse and social interaction as a more universal concept, and it occurs naturally in the reality of bilingual, multilingual usage in a dynamic and fluid way. Pedagogical translanguaging is like a planned strategy, because some people would say that what's the purpose? What are the purposes of translanguaging, right? Does translanguaging really creates better understanding, and does translanguaging really create better learning results, right? We need more empirical studies, but here that people may use pedagogical translanguaging as a planned strategy. Yeah, that people really would look at whether translanguaging would create better learning outcome. Okay, so it's defined as intentional translanguaging or classroom translanguaging. Yeah, because it embraces instructional strategies that integrate two or more languages. But of course, this is again complex. We don't say that translanguaging can automatically create better learning outcome, or monolingual EMI, monolingual teaching ideology is bad. We don't really want to put this dichotomy, yeah, like this. But we want more research on this. We want more research from a bottom-up perspective, right? We need study, for example, needs analysis from student and teachers' perspective. Yeah, so here, from this translanguaging perspective, we look at multilingualism, that learning in contact to create new meanings that we don't really see languaging or translanguaging, yeah, challenges the concept of named languages, and also revisits the traditional hierarchy and superiority of Anglophone varieties of English. Again, similarly, yeah, from this global English's perspective, we don't really say that everyone should follow the standard so-called British American English, that if you violates, if your English is if your English deviates from the standard, right, people will be punished, people will be penalized. But again, from this global Englishes or translanguaging perspective, we look at this locality, right, ELT from this local perspective. We don't want to, as language educators, right, we don't want to reinforce this ideology of coloniality. Yeah, later I've got two quotes from Professor Kumaravathi-Velu, yeah, challenged this coloniality in language education and also in knowledge acquisition. But of course, translanguaging does not equal to multiple monolingualism. It's not about simply code switching, that people switch one code from another code, and it's not about how many languages a person can speak, right? It's not about speaking one language and two languages, three languages. So it's not about multiple monolingualism. Yeah. So that's again the complexity. So if we talk about something, yeah, more positive, but in reality, we have to recognize that we need more research, because native speaker dominance and native speakerism also happens a lot in reality, especially for many, like if we still use the term of native, non-native, that non-native professionals may legitimize their own marginalization. Yeah, that's in many cases, right? Sometimes we don't get this equal treatment, equal pay, equal housing standard, etc., etc. So to some extent, right? So Professor Kumar Ravadivelu also argues that both the process of marginalization and the practice of self-marginalization bring to the fore the coloniality rather than the globality of the English language. He also argues this hegemonic shadow over the activity of TESOL. And here he emphasized the textbook as well, right? That textbook preparation and production remained a centrally controlled, globally targeted activity with very little role for local ELT professionals. Yeah. So I'm researching this textbook design and to see to what extent this kind of locality has been emerged, has been kind of incorporated into the textbook, into education, because in many cases, especially in secondary education and general English education, many teachers still rely too much on the textbook. Yeah. And again, it's not the teacher's fault, of course. It's about policy as well. So it's complicated. Yeah, that's why I think this type of research would be interesting. That as I talk about a bit, yeah, that we see this native speakerism has been criticized. Multilingualism has been viewed as the norm of the discourse of English, right? We still need more study, very few bottom-up practices in certain contexts, right? I edited a volume with a colleague, Dr. Handoyo Widodo, in relation to global Englishes, curriculum, pedagogy, assessment. So some contributors wrote chapters. They share some bottom-up practices, yeah, in different contexts. But again, I think we need more practices. We need more studies in the aspects, right? So here, less impactful. Yeah, we see these bottom-up attempts less impactful in terms of enabling practitioners and policymakers to understand the need for translating global Englishes and translanguaging in textbook design and curriculum development. Of course, it's understandable, yeah, because for textbook, even for assessment, it's more like high stake. They want to promote this type of product, yeah. So while global Englishes and translanguaging, if they are not really the mainstream in language education, yeah, so it's not an easy task, right, to translate those notions there. But we also need to look at policy, language policy planning aspects, yeah, because if we look at the power issue, right, the teachers, I also in another talk, I also had a metaphor that my metaphor is that I think people also have this metaphor that language teachers or content teachers, especially, yeah, they are sandwiched in the middle, right? So at the top, they have this policy level, and also they also need to have this stress from the parents, from their students as well. So again, those are very complicated issues. So we need to look at those issues from a meso perspective and also the macro level. I think it's even more challenging, more difficult if we look at this macro level. Yeah. Right. So that we challenge this monolingual language policy planning, recognizing the diversity and complexity of language policy planning in the Greater Bay Area of China will enable policymakers to further address this issue, right, of what international higher education means from the level of language policy planning, because we have various greater resources in the Greater Bay Area. Yeah. So from this linguistic resources, cultural resources, it's very multilingual, multicultural. So we also need to look at this language contact, this cultural contact as well. Okay. So studies, yeah, people research textbook design and curriculum developments in the GBA area of China. Also, people found this imbalanced, with Hong Kong as the main focus. Macau and Chinese mainland are responding slowly. Hong Kong is the context area, but people with lots of studies, scholars in Hong Kong, based in Hong Kong, studied a lot. Okay, from these global Englishes, translanguaging, and also textbook design. Okay, so we need more research. And here, I try to incorporate language policy planning from this textbook study, textbook design and curriculum development perspective, while I also echoed some previous studies, some previous arguments. For example, Molina has stated that teaching English in today's globalized or globalizing era means going beyond the idealized native speaker model. The ecological approach to textbook design needs the global Englishes framework with the translanguaging approach that could have an impact on reforming curriculum development. So again, the learning goals and the textbook content should be readdressed to separate them from the fixed native standard ELT, and also a prescribed curriculum should be revisited from the global Englishes perspective. Some studies in the Chinese context, mainland Chinese context, also found that Chinese culture, local culture, is marginalized in the overall corpus of English textbooks used in the Chinese context. The English language also featured British American culture, revealing this native speakerism ideology, while also cultures of the outer and expanding circle countries' context were largely neglected. Another one, Chan, okay, I think he used to base in the University of Hong Kong, also investigated the impact of world Englishes and ELF research in ELT curricula and textbook, right? For the past 4 decades, he found that there remains a gap in the literature about discussing the intercultural strategies needed for international intercultural communication, and varieties of English were not sufficiently referred to. So to some extent, I would say that global Englishes and translanguaging provide type of paradigm or theory for further research. Not only textbooks or curriculum, but other aspects of language education from a more dynamic, from more inclusive perspective. Okay, a colleague and I also conducted a piece of research. We look at the national English curriculum that's more from this secondary education, by the Chinese Ministry of Education, to determine the extent to which global English, global Englishes is incorporated. The study here we found the restricted national level, and also the concept of culture was still perceived at a restricted national level. So people say, okay, Chinese culture, British culture, American culture, etc. Right? Intercultural awareness was not well represented there, and again, this so-called still positioned Anglophone cultures as superior to local cultures and other cultures around the world. If you're interested in, this paper has been published in ELT journal. But for a more more optimistic, from a brighter side, we see here that the multilingualism, the linguistic diversity. So from a more optimistic aspect, in the new edition of the new senior English for China students, I don't know, this is very awkward name here. It's just called like this. So a unit entitled English Around the World was changed to Languages Around the World. So in the new edition, so it seems that English is no longer, again, the only language for communication. So here I think for textbook composers as well, they start to recognize, and also for publishers as well, because not only for textbook designers, textbook writers. Publisher is also another gatekeeper, right, for publishing this textbook, because text publishers, they also want to, it's also like a money-making organization. So we also argue that for international publications, those publishers also make loads of money, but this is another topic, another issue anyway. So scholars, many scholars, especially textbook writers, composers, they recognize this linguistic diversity in textbook and curricula. So some changes, have been found here. I think this is optimistic to some extent, right? One of the key changes in the inclusion of home cultures in the textbook design and curriculum development. If we go back to this one is the previous version of the National English Curriculum. I think in the new version of the National English Curriculum, also starts to emphasize this inclusion of home cultures in textbook design and curriculum. That we look at here from a more trans perspective, transcultural as well, right? Translanguaging, transcultural. So it is worth exploring students' attitudes towards this new presentation of home cultures in textbook designs and curriculum development as well. So I just, this morning, I just found a screenshot of this unit. So if those teachers, especially secondary language teachers, we used to have a unit called English around the world. And here is languages around the world. Although we see the separate pictures, but still we start to see this multilingual, multicultural perspective. The topic, etc. So the study has been published. This is a special issue published in the Asian Pacific Journal of Second and Foreign Language Education with the theme Rethinking Language Policy and Planning in the Greater Bay Area of China, Insights from Translanguaging Theory, guest edited by professors Edward Wen, Lily Han, Huang Weihu, and Mark Teng. I also saw Mark Teng here, so thank you very much for your support as well. So this special issue, there are all the papers, all the collections, are very, very helpful for people who are interested in this translanguaging in the Greater Bay Area of China. But time limits, I just share my study, also co-authored with colleagues, with the title called Global Englishes and Translanguaging, in textbook design and curriculum development. We adopted Professor Byram's this cultural content analysis, and we didn't analyze the whole textbook, but with the focus on this "What do you say?" section. And we also distributed a questionnaire to 810 Chinese university students regarding the incorporation of home cultures in textbook, and also people's attitudes of this multilingual, multicultural in textbook design, and textbook in using the textbook. And we also had a quick interview of students who had experiences using the textbook. So this is again the series. We only focus on only one textbook, but with this intercultural, it's called 文化之桥, with this intercultural elements. That's why we were interested in the intercultural elements in the textbook and local culture, incorporation of local culture. That's why we chose this textbook for analysis. And this is Byram's framework of this cultural content. So from the social identity and social groups, social interaction, beliefs and behavior, social and political institutions, socialization and the life circle, national history, national geography, stereotypes, and national identity. So this is the analysis, right? We found some certain amount of Chinese home culture content in the textbook. Okay, I'm not going to read everything. Yeah, we found some, but we just at the first glance, we see still not balanced distribution. Yeah, so we argued that yes, this textbook has inclusion of the local element there, but it seems that it's not a balanced distribution. Yeah, as well as here, we see the different units. There is an imbalanced distribution. Yeah, so I just went through this quickly. Yeah, if you are interested in, you can read this paper. So for questionnaire results, we also found whether students have an understanding of local home culture as well. Yeah, we still see yeah, not like about 40%, yeah, that they were familiar with some aspects. Also that some also expressed that they knew little about the home culture. Yes, some courses related to home culture, and most of the courses were taught by Chinese teachers in Chinese, and also by Chinese teacher in both Chinese and English. Yeah. So how do we, if we think about intercultural communication, how do people share different cultural element aspects, how we understand different cultures, right? People have positive attitudes, right, of the local culture inclusion. Yeah. This 73%, yeah, of the respondents thought they could only express parts of their ideas in English. Still, it's very difficult. We know that local cultures are very complicated, right? Not only Chinese, I think different every culture. Okay, so 126 believes that they could not express their ideas accurately in English. Okay, this number thought they could clearly, just a very few, right? Less than 10%, fewer than 10%. 260 also respondents believed that current English textbooks incorporate enough local culture. Yeah, well, it's opposite. And again, this is a topic, right? It's not about the more the better, right? Yeah, we also need to understand this. But how, I think, is more important. Yeah. So some of the interview quotes, extracts. So the student feels it's not enough, right? And again, of course, it's not the more the better, right? I say that. But it's how we deal with this. Yeah. So maybe students of Chinese language or history learn more, while students of other majors are not exposed to such courses about Chinese culture. And very interesting, this student also mentions that the bilingual curriculum, and even the teachers can't express certain points clearly in English. So again, in terms of student education, learning, I think teacher development is also very important here. So even if we finish learning and know the connotation of those cultures, we can only express them in Chinese, not in English. After reading the textbook, I think that home culture incorporated may be enough, but what I learned is mainly after class. Yeah. So again, how people make use of this, I mean, classroom only 45, only 90 minutes, but this trends perspective, I think people are exposed to various, right, intercultural settings, the intercultural incidents, and also what learning happened, not really limited, are not really limited into this classroom setting. So students also make good use of the time after class. Yeah. So the future development of the textbook maybe to carry out some interaction, yeah, of interdisciplinary subjects. Yeah, these are from their own direct quotes. So a quick summary, yeah. That's the first one, the cultural content analysis, right? Show that Byron's, there's 8 characteristics were all presented, but the proportions were different in the textbook. While only a few units contained sufficient content related to local culture, they seemed to compare the local culture and other cultures superficially at the national level with the simple dichotomy of Chinese and Western culture. So with this trans aspect still not really incorporated in the textbooks, yeah, or even global Englishes, regardless of its trends. But from the questionnaire results, yeah, we see the majority of respondents had a general partial understanding, but few thought they could clearly introduce Chinese culture to other people. And they more often learned about Chinese culture in Chinese than in English. And the interview findings also echoed the questionnaire results, suggested that teachers should offer more guidance to incorporate. And of course, above teacher, from the policy level, where teachers themselves should be offered more guidance as well. So the findings indicate that the incorporation of global Englishes, right, local culture from this global Englishes, from this translanguaging perspective in the English textbook design and also curriculum development is still in its infancy stage, and there's much room for improvement. Okay, so about 10 minutes, I would just like to summarize the talk and also the findings, some empirical evidence that how I think GBA area is more developed, right, in terms of economy, in terms of social this contact, it's more dynamic. So I think this Greater Bay Area in China, we can do a lot, right? If we want to incorporate those notions of global Englishes and translanguaging. This is from Melina. So I think just now I share a bit, but here is his argument, right? The future curriculum development in global English is first, yeah, is girded by the philosophy of language as a complex and adaptive system, is informed by students' immediate needs and learning goals. We see here we also need more needs analysis from this bottom-up voices, right? It's grounded in the sociolinguistic reality of English in the world, as I just mentioned, that from this multilingual, multicultural aspect, and with more so-called non-native speakers of English interaction among them, and also in the context in which the curriculum is developed and administered, that we really need to look at this locality, right? We also need to see this contextualized curriculum. Yeah, in different contexts, might be different, right? So we need to empower the local, and we also need to have this contextualized curriculum as well. Utilize students' linguistic and cultural capital as learning resources. So that's a reflection of translanguaging. Promotes linguistic creativity and ownership in learning and using language. Requires teachers to work together with other key stakeholders, including students, right? I think we also learn a lot from students when we talk to them, communicate, converse with them. Yeah, so I think it's not about one way of knowledge, instruction of knowledge, preaching something, right? I think it's more like communication, conversation. Yeah, I think another talk, I also talk about Professor Kumar's. I think later I'll share a bit of the post method. Well, Professor Kumar Ravadivalu proposed the practicality, particularity, practicality, and possibility, that he also emphasized a lot on the interaction, working together with students, with other stakeholders, yeah, even parents, right? And also employs various assessment practices. So something we see here, assessment practices, yeah, that's in high stake assessment. To what extent, right, global Englishes and translanguaging can be incorporated into high stake assessment? I doubt, right? Still very difficult at the moment. But from more bottom up, formative assessment, maybe we can have this practices, yeah, assessment practices, activities, task-based, real life, etc. More authentic, right, communication, etc. That assess learners' strategic and creative ability to use language to get things done, negotiate meanings, and shuttle effectively between various communicative contexts, right? This can hardly be achieved in high-stake traditional paper pen assessment. Yeah, but I think it's important, but it's again, powerful, helpful, but time consuming, and we need more qualified people, right? Examiners, if we want to empower students and teachers to do this. Yeah. If you're interested in that, this is a chapter, right, from Melina. Some colleagues and I will also propose sample global Englishes oriented learning goals. Yeah, from accent, from pronunciation. Okay, G pronunciation and lexical grammatical variations. That we have the goals like this. Culture and global Englishes as well. Yeah, I'm not going to read every item, but we'll see how we have this students' awareness and intercultural knowledge, and from this more variation, that not fixed perspective, especially also engage students in this inter and intra-cultural discussion, yeah, and how they understand this language variations, how they have exposure in the sociolinguistic encounters in both inner, outer, expanding circle contexts. That very importantly, that really students that need to go out of the classroom, that learning should not only happen in classroom. Yeah, but not many students at the moment, I would say, that are very interested in learning, and maybe they are not aware of that. I think out of classroom learning can even have a greater impact on them, right? Especially how they remember things, how they memorize things. It's more like not from this formal learning contexts, right? And even this informal learning context can be more powerful for informal learning, I would say. Yeah. So this is another paper that I worked with my master students. So we published this one in TESOL EJ, that we compare and we see these commonalities and the conflation of global Englishes and translanguaging. We see some similarities, some overlapped, right? Here in the middle, the overlapped features. Characteristics of global Englishes and translanguaging, and they also have the distinctive features, while here translanguaging is more from more like interaction, communication, a critical decolonizing pedagogy, political stance, while global Englishes still focuses more too much with the term itself on communication through English. So I think they can be compared, and I think it's complement, right? So if we empower learners, empower teachers, and we want to make learning happen, yeah, I think we can still see something. That's how we have this flexible dynamic use of language, how we challenge native speakerism, inclusion of multiple discursive, and also promotion of equitable language education. While Professor Kumaravadi values post method that from this particularity, practicality, possibility perspective, I'm thinking that this post method approach, yeah, in some other situations, some other talks, some papers also share how we combine this global Englishes and translanguaging. Yeah, more dynamic ways, not from the fixed way. Yeah, that how we recognize this linguistic, intercultural, multimodal repertoire in knowledge acquisition, that how we empower learners and empower teachers as well for this global competence development for critical and decolonizing pedagogies. So let the multilingual lens reconsider the monolingual bias in traditional SLA theories and adopt a sociolinguistic, sociocultural perspective of what competence means, right? Especially we are bilingual, multilingual speakers, instead of constructing the societal monolingualism as the norm, okay? And respect linguistic multilingual cultural resources as people's repertoire. So here, the need to understand the complexity, reciprocity, and porosity of multilingual resource repertoires. Yeah, with its ongoing need for access to standardized language varieties. The student's first language as well to allow translanguaging as a natural linguistic practice. I like this quote from Norton and Tomney that language is a practice that constructs and is constructed by the ways language learners understand themselves, their social surroundings, their histories, and their possibilities for the future. That's how learners can be empowered, that they don't just learn language specifically to pass exams or to pursue further study. For example, passing exams for further study, passing exams for a degree, something like this, because we it's more powerful, and I think it's more helpful if learners can recognize the need, right, for using language for different purposes, for knowledge, for learning, and also for their own, right? Because in this sense, translanguaging also happened, right, internally by different individuals. They really understand what they need, what they want, okay, as individual in the society. Yeah, the linguistic aspect is only very little part of it. That learning, communication, etc. is more than language use, right? So I think something that I would like to conclude this talk and with this quote. Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Professor Fang. So here we comes to our Q&A section. So for the audience who we have one question. So feel free to use your microphone to ask questions, or you can type your questions in the chat box so that we can see your questions. So we have one audience.
Yeah,
Chen
we
Yin.
see the Chen Yin Chen, yes.
Okay, please.
Can you see me?
Yes.
Hold on. Sorry. Okay. So my question, thank you, Professor Fang, and thank you for your sharing of your knowledge and your paper. So here I have a question for you. And my question here is that because when I saw the title of your presentation, my first impression, the first question came into my mind is because our understanding of translanguaging is we encourage students to use their language repertoire, linguistic repertoire to communicate whatever they want to construct their own knowledge, their individual knowledge. But textbook, when we look at textbook, but the language, I mean, the textbook encourage students to learn static language. It seems like that there is a contradiction between translanguaging, the language in translanguaging, and also the static, the named language in a textbook. And how do you understand the contradiction between the named language in a textbook and translanguaging? Yeah, this is my question.
Okay, thank you for your question. One thing is that the named language in the textbook, because to a large extent it's difficult. We recognize the difficulties of textbook writers to, create this translanguaging space for textbook design. So one thing is that not only from the linguistic aspect, right, from multimodal aspect, from this semiotic perspective, textbook writers can try to incorporate the various elements there. And another stakeholder is teachers, that how teachers use textbooks from a translanguaging perspective, especially from the teacher agency, right? That how translanguaging can be incorporated from this written textbook. Yeah, and again, I don't really like this idea of using one standard textbook through the semester of learning, right? In secondary school, teachers have not that much flexibility. By university, yeah, we have more flexibility in doing this. But again, for teachers, how teachers show their teacher agency, right? in dealing with the various content seems very static, seems very fixed language, to create this understanding of multilingual, of translanguaging to the student. I think this is one of the teacher's job and teacher's responsibility as well. And textbook design, yes, people try to incorporate various aspects, not only prioritize English, right, as the standard, as the only standard norm. They can try to start to include varieties of English, but again, this is very limited, but go beyond including varieties of English, okay, beyond those different accent exposure, but try to have this more localized element to encourage learning, to encourage discussion. But again, those are from the teachers agency. So I'm conducting another project researching teacher agency in EMI content teaching as well. So teacher agency is another aspect. Yeah. In the study, I haven't conducted any class observation. Yeah, but I had some other studies with the teacher classroom observation that we see how this teachers agency can really empower learning through this fixed static textbook use. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Professor Fang. There is another thought. Maybe I think in the textbook, maybe in the question part or the discussion part, textbook can give such comments to teachers and the students that for example, you can use whatever language you can use to discuss with your peers. I mean, like if in textbook encourage teachers and students to do in this way, I mean, like it would be like easier for teacher to exercise their agency in the classroom to encourage students to use translanguaging practices in the classroom. This is yes, this is my own understanding.
Yeah.
Like even though like teachers' agency is very important, but I mean like in the textbook, because students prefer to like accept textbook as the standard, they will tell teachers, okay, you can see textbook written in this way. And yeah, I mean like maybe it would be better. This is my own understanding.
Yeah.
It would be better.
But also they need a degree, right, of how much translanguaging that teacher would allow students to have, right? Because for some students, yeah, they've got different needs. So I think to what certain degree translanguaging should be used as well, should be encouraged as well. Yeah, I think we need to see the different contexts that how this can be used to maximize learning acquisition as well. And students don't really, learn this in a stressed, pressured way. So it makes learning happen.
Yeah, I agree with you. Thank you. Yeah, I think, yes, just like you said, like teachers' agency is very important for like balancing and like the language student to learn and how they use their like employ their translanguaging repertoire to learn the language. So I mean, like just like you said, teachers' agency is very important to balancing this two kind of things. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you for the questions. And any more questions for Professor Fang? So seems not. So maybe I personally I have one question. I'm not an expert of English teaching and translanguaging, but I'm interested in the teacher's perspective towards translanguaging, right? So you mentioned the translanguaging approach and using the textbook to teach global Englishes in university context. But I'm interested in the teacher's perspective. So do you have any preliminary data talking about how teachers feel of this new approach?
Yeah, thank you for the question. I conducted another study years ago with the teacher's perspective. We found that at least in mainland China context, certain teachers really welcome translanguaging, And they use this automatically, right, spontaneously in the classroom. That they feel, we found that certain features, for example, translanguaging was used for scaffolding, to create classroom rapport with students, and also for localized content understanding. That certain some teachers really welcome translanguaging and they use this in the classroom setting, while some teachers they were more skeptical of their using translanguaging, because one thing, their students really, if they choose these EMI courses, they feel that English is the only medium of instruction for them. And although no policy written, no university policy written, teachers also mentioned that there was this invisible language policy that they are required to use English only. And also they were afraid of this so-called the university classroom inspector, something that they would observe what language that the teachers use. And if you don't follow English only in EMI courses, the teacher may be penalized as well. So they also worried about, translanguaging practice. So certain amounts, yeah, they are a bit skeptical. But yeah, and another study I conducted, I think with another colleague, so in ADU, Professor Michelle Gu and Professor George Jiang at Hong Kong U. So the data in universities, I think high school context in Hong Kong, also we found the supporters of translanguaging and also in betweeners, that they see the need of translanguaging, they see the benefit of translanguaging, but in practice, right, where they've got certain policy that they had to stick to English only. We've got the in-betweeners, and also we've got the skeptics that they don't really see translanguaging. It can be beneficial for language learning. Yeah, we also look at teachers' their attitudes, and students. It seems that students really they welcome translanguaging also to help less proficient students as well. But again, they don't expect them using translanguaging to answer teachers' questions, that they still would follow this EMI. If we look at translanguaging from a linguistic aspect, right? But if we look at translanguaging from a broader aspect, this is all translanguaging practice anyway. Yeah.
Yes, I agree that translanguaging approach in English teaching is really a very new approach, right? Because we implement EMI for years in Hong Kong as a in bilingual city or under bilingual education system, right? So we have maybe this will be the last question, right? So I have Mary want to ask Professor Fang one question. So please.
Hi, good morning, Ms. Professor Fang. Thanks for your
Hello.
sharing. Hi, can you hear me?
Yes. Hello.
Sorry. I'm very appreciative of the lecture you shared with us. And as a teacher, as an English teacher for many years, I want to answer the previous question you asked as a teacher. What is my attitude towards translanguaging? From my own understanding and point of view, I welcome translanguaging as an instruction pedagogy in the class very much, because as my own learning and teaching experience, I think in the past I met a lot of confusion moments, what kind of language I should use in the class and to talk with my students. So I think my attitude towards translanguage is welcome very much. And just now, as you mentioned, from the student-centered future class, I think students welcome translanguaging, so we need to promote the translanguaging pedagogy in the future. So just now, as you mentioned in the slide, it's about two kinds of translanguaging: spontaneous translanguaging and the pedagogical translanguaging. The second one means the teachers need to prepare the language policies and what kind of language use in the class in their lesson design. So the first one means about the conversations between teachers and students. So I want to know more. So what should teachers do to prepare, well prepared for the lesson for both translanguaging, you know, the pedagogical translanguaging, and how to prepare and react to the students' questions and the conversations in class.
Okay, yeah. Thank you, Mary, for this question. Personally, I haven't really conducted this pedagogical translanguaging for prepared because with certain limitations. But I think Professor Angeline, also now in working in Edu Hong Kong, with her colleagues, and also Eve Liu, a former colleague of mine, and who is now working at the City University of Macau. They conducted some studies in related to how they to design a syllabus, right, with certain elements, with certain, because it's they conducted a study with this medical students. It's a academic writing for medical students, so it's more like content learning as well. So they started to design, maybe this is something, yeah, that can guide you as a reference if in the future you are interested in pedagogical translanguaging. And so for they designed the syllabus that would put certain units and with certain expressions, certain ways, certain terms, terminologies, they might consider, right, with translanguaging elements. But again, here, translanguaging in this case does not only limit to linguistic aspects. They have this multimodal aspect. They may draw pictures. They may also use this semiotic functions. So for example, for them to understand some terminologies in medicine, for example, in medical, this area. Yeah, so terminologies in this sense. So they plan this, and then they also allow students, when the students do their presentation, they can give feedback, they can give comments. They also allowed, yeah, maybe certain moments, they also allowed translanguaging. So this has been written in the syllabus, yeah, for the big, yeah, curriculum. So in this sense, certain units, certain chapters, certain units, they allow translanguaging happened. But in this sense, translanguaging is regarded from more like this multimodal, multi-semiotic aspects. Yeah, and I think in Professor Channels and Professor Dirk Gotha, they also study translanguaging in Spain, pedagogical translanguaging in Spain. So there is a Cambridge element called pedagogical translanguaging that if you are interested in designing a course using pedagogical translanguaging, that might be a reference for you. But this is planned ahead. Yeah, but planned ahead using pictures, multimodals, linguistic resources to understand, yeah, knowledge, understand different terms, plan ahead. Okay?
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Thanks for your
Okay,
answer.
so thank you, Professor Fang, for your answer, which is very informative and providing us with many good references. So thanks again for giving this inspiring talk related to translanguaging and global Englishes. And we look forward to reading more and more research papers and of course your monograph related to the topic, because this is a really new and timely topic that needs more research. Okay, so thank you so much. So let's end our lectures, and if you have further questions, feel free to contact. I think Professor Fang will welcome you to raise any questions and discuss, having some idea exchange with you. Okay. Okay. Bye bye.
Thank you again. Thank you. Bye bye.
Thank you. Bye bye.